going to pivot from killer robots to robots that might actually save some lives. My next guest is Dan Chu. He's the Chief Product Officer at Waymo. Waymo obviously is one of the largest and most successful self-driving car companies. And with that, I'll invite Dan up to the stage. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
So I think we'll get started with a quick video just to set the stage, and then we'll have our conversation. All right, so those were not Waymo employees.
No, they're not. They're members of the public. It's part of either our Waymo One commercial ride-hailing service or the early rider program.
So I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't quite understand. I just got a ride in one of these around Mountain View 2 days ago. But these cars are on the street picking up consumers today, both in Mountain View and in Phoenix. So can you just give us the scope of the project?
Absolutely, yeah. So if we go to Phoenix, we started the early rider program back in 2017, actually, and over 20,000 people applied just within a few days of its opening to members of the public in the Metro Phoenix area. And so over the course of that time, we've been ramping up trips. We have thousands of riders that are taking part in trips, everything from commuting to work to going on date nights, things like that. And over the last few months, we've actually been ramping up our fully driverless trips. And that's what you're seeing in the video. These are not actors. These are true riders that are experiencing fully driverless trips. We also have that in Mountain View as well. We have our own dog food program, or what we have our employees using our own cars. And so we want our employees to be experiencing the product itself, but definitely in Phoenix, it's been exciting for us to ramp to this next step in terms of fully driverless.
And you were telling me that you actually use the service to drop your son off at school in the morning?
I do, yes. So on a regular basis, I take my son to school. I don't know how it is for other folks, but my mornings are always hectic. We're always running late. And I can never seem to get those coveted parking spots in the school parking lot. And so being able to take a Waymo, be able to actually chat with my son instead of yelling at him, and be able to spend some time there has been really nice.
It must make you like one of the coolest dads dropping off. Like dads in their Teslas, like who cares about that?
I heard he has dropped the name a couple times in terms of classrooms, so we'll see.
So you've got a product background, and you've worked on a lot of software products. How did you find yourself in self-driving cars?
For me, Waymo, what drew me to Waymo and why I'm at Waymo today has really been the culmination of a search for the intersection of three things. One is around social impact, and I know that resonates with that's true of many of the folks in the audience today, around technology being the core of that solution, and then that intersecting with a sustainable business model. And so, as you mentioned, I started my career in the midst of the dot-com boom in software engineering across startups. Worked in more B2B SaaS when that was kind of a new thing being coined. And I was looking for more in terms of the societal impact. And so I spent some time looking at mission-driven organizations and how technology could be a part of that. So I spent some time volunteering with an organization called the Benetech Initiative. Worked on a project around secure human rights violation reporting. Spent some time with the United Way around how technology can help make philanthropy more efficient. And then during my time at grad school, I spent some time with a nonprofit called TechnoServe in Kenya, looking at how mobile phones can help leapfrog developing countries, especially that was at the time when M-Pesa, this mobile banking thing, was taking off. And so it got me really excited about trying to find this intersection, which is when there was an opportunity at Waymo. That's when I got really excited. Because if you look at it, I really feel like lucky and blessed to be at Waymo and contributing to Waymo because I feel like it has those three factors. Around social impact, we're trying to save 1.35 million lives that die on our roads on a global basis every single year. It's one of the top causes of death. And then technology is at the core of that solution. I really do believe that self-driving can contribute, because I do feel like when I was across that search, and many of you might have felt this way, I think sometimes technology is a kind of window dressing, or it's a side project. It's not core to the issue. And so it's really exciting when technology is the core of that solution. And then lastly, around a sustainable business model, right? So for self-driving tech, I'm really excited about the different applications that are available, right? So whether it's ride-hailing, whether it's delivery, whether it's long-haul trucking, or even personal car ownership, these are all areas that I think have really sustainable business models.
So there's a lot of players in this space. There's a lot of companies that are trying to develop self-driving cars. Is there something unique about Waymo's approach and how it's rolling out the service?
So I think the core to our philosophy in terms of self-driving rollout is around making it iterative and taking a step at a time. I want to really about, because it's such a new technology, I think it's really important that the most safe and responsible way is to take a step at a time. And you see that through the history of our company, right? So we started back in 2009 as the Google Self-Driving Car Project. It wasn't until 2015 that we rolled out the first fully driverless ride in Austin, Texas. 2017, that's when we rolled out the early rider program, as I mentioned. And then later that year, that's when we started a fleet of Chrysler Pacificas in Metro Phoenix. And then last year, at the end of last year, that's when we launched Waymo One, which is our commercial ride-hailing service. We really want to have the confidence to take that next step. And then the most exciting thing is what we mentioned at the beginning is around really getting to the fully driverless rides this year. We've been rolling that over the course of the last few months to riders in our different rider programs.
What have been some of the challenges you faced in rolling these out? You're testing it in smaller markets now, but what are the biggest blockers? Are they technical blockers? Are they regulatory blockers?
So when I think about blockers, maybe I would put them in two different categories. I think one is around some of the challenges, if you could put into kind of technical, regulatory, and product. So for technical, I think it's definitely a problem that has long tail questions, right? It's definitely not something you could just do a kind of most fits and then just kind of move on. There's definitely a long tail there. And there's also questions around how challenges that we have to tackle around scaling. So tackling weather, next steps around weather and things like that. Around regulatory, I definitely think we have a path forward right now, but when we think about scaling it on a global basis, there's definitely different regulatory regimes. So for instance, even here in California today, there is not a way to launch a commercial AV ride-hailing service yet. And for the product, I think one of the interesting challenges that we've been tackling is it's a completely new category, right? So especially with safety implications, you have to be really careful around how you're trying to learn. And so I think that's led to a very iterative process as we're trying to learn about that. And I think the last piece is around public perception, right? I do worry that sometimes people don't really see road safety as a core issue, and so it's a lot harder to get them convinced around the need for this technology.
Road safety in that this will be an improvement over what we have today, and understanding that.
I think it's more that people don't see road safety as a concern, right? Like I think if you ask most people whether it's one of the top causes of death, they would never come up, right? I think we've been taught to be numb to it. So for instance, like if we were going to take if people were driving to Tehachapi today, and you heard like a report on traffic and it was a fatality, what do we program to think? We're programmed to think it's more traffic, or the traffic is going to last longer, not that somebody's life has been lost. So I think at the core of it, I think there's a public perception challenge.
Yeah, I think that, and it goes to that idea of risk, and that if automobiles were sold with some kind of calculation of how many people would die in automobiles, there would be a warning on the side of the car that says this product may kill you, and presumably in a self-driving situation that you would be able to diminish that risk. But have you found? I mean, one of the big barriers is convincing people that this will indeed be safer. How are you going to go about sort of messaging that to users?
Yeah, so when I think about public perception, I take it from two perspectives. One is the rider perspective, right? And how people are making that shift from just a member of the public and actually becoming a rider, some of the people that you see in the video. And I think overall, it's been really exciting to see the positive reception from our riders. So the vast majority of our riders on a 1 to 5 scale give the rides five stars. They're using it for a whole variety of different use cases, everything. And so like a couple examples, like we have some riders, Roger and Sharon. They're actually marathon runners. And they love the capability of they can go and not think about parking, and they can run their miles and miles and get picked up at another location, right? And so the riders have really responded well, and they love the consistency of the product. Like every time they hail a car, they know exactly what car is coming. It has some of the features that we built in it, to like music and other things like that, and being able to have that time back. So from the rider perspective, I think we were seeing really positive reception. But I think the core of your question is really around the general public. And I agree with you that I do think that they're skeptical. And I think in some ways they deserve to be, right? It's a new technology, it's new. And so we have a responsibility to earn that trust. And so I think in earning that, there's probably 3 ways that we're tackling it. One way is around education. So it's around, we were one of the first companies to release a voluntary safety report. It's around partnering with different organizations around getting the word out around both the challenges around road safety as well as the solutions. So we partnered with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, we partnered with AAA. So I think education is an important component of that. Engagement is another one. So we've, from day one, taken a very proactive, collaborative stance with regulators and policymakers, everything from a federal, state, a local, and hyperlocal level. The mayor of Chandler is actually an avid Waymo One rider. And when we started testing in Miami and in LA, we received great kudos from the city officials, and we're really excited to work with them going forward. So I think engagement another way. The final way I would say is really around delivering value, right? Our goal is not just to go around testing in various cities, it's to deliver a product that has value to those citizens. And so what we've seen in Phoenix, in Metro Phoenix, that's what we want to do, right, is deliver a useful service that people will enjoy.
Is there anything, you've given thousands of rides at this point, is there anything about how people are using the cars that surprised you? That as a product developer, you were like, I didn't think people would do that when they got in?
I definitely think that like they've come up with very, very interesting use cases. Like the marathon was one example. I think it's also how much they enjoy the various features. So for instance, let's take the music feature that we have, right? Various mobility services have offered that feature before, but for people to feel the privacy of them being in their fully driverless car, people often talk about their ability to rock out on like some music that they would feel embarrassed that other people would listen to. So I think that it's really been exciting to see kind of how they've really embraced that privacy, that time to themselves, that consistency.
So how do you see these cars like reshaping cities and sort of our landscape? Because I mean, we've built our cities and our towns based on traditional automobiles. How is that going to shift as this enters the equation?
Yeah, I definitely am excited about the possibilities that self-driving technology can change that. So if we look at from an environmental or land use perspective, so we know that cars are one of the most expensive purchases households makes. Right? Yet it sits idle 95% time in the driveway. We also know in urban cities, parking lots take up vast square footage that when you total them up in just the US metro areas, they total up to more than the state of New Jersey in terms of square footage. Right? So I definitely see kind of self-driving tech being able to reclaim that and create efficiencies and be able to have that land be better used for our citizens rather than for our vehicles. I also see benefits in terms of access, right? So if people, we know that 20 to 30 million adult Americans, they actually aren't able to qualify for a driver's license. And so that has implications, right? Everything from the mobility for employment to around being lonely and other things like that, right? So these are some of the impacts that we think we can have on cities and citizens within those areas.
Do you think that this is going to be primarily, it's going to start as a ride-hailing service? Do you think people are actually going to go and buy self-driving cars and that will be their primary vehicle? Like, how do you think the use case is going to evolve? I
do think it'll start as ride-hailing. So if we look at the different applications that we're planning, they do come in as somewhat of a sequence. So ride-hailing is really our focus. I think that's a great way for us to get it out to a broader set of citizens, people. And then long-haul trucking, I think, is another application that we are working on today, right? We already have because there's growing demand, right, around the use case, and there's different things that we can be supportive there. Delivery is another one that I think could be really helpful in terms of being able to have that in your area. But I think personal car ownership is probably a little further out, but definitely an application, especially as we're thinking about if our mission is to make every mile safer, we have to think about the broad spectrum of use cases.
Very cool. Let's get the audience in here a little bit. We've got a question right up in front. Is it you, Robert?
Yep.
All right.
I'm Robert Scoble. I've been doing a lot of research around America with attitudes towards self-driving cars, and I wonder how this is going to hit your customer acquisition cost. And here's the common answer I hear when I ask, are you ready to get in a car without a steering wheel, like a Waymo? The answer is hell no, almost consistently. So how, Kraft food executives told me they spend $34 to acquire a customer to eat cheese, which is something a lot more amenable to most people than getting in a self-driving car. How are you going to overcome that, and are you planning on a really high customer acquisition cost?
So I think you're right from a perspective of the skepticism that we find, right? So I think that's one of the ways that we're going to tackle it is, as I mentioned, we're going to have to do more education around it, right? It is relatively new still, right, to many people, and they don't realize, like you mentioned, like how far we've been able to advance the technology, even in Metro Phoenix, right? So I think getting the word out in education has got to be a broader campaign for us to be able to do that, right? Because for us to convince each of those individually is going to be challenging. I think the second half is around what we see, even with skeptical riders and them being able to access the technology. I think we talk about even like the first 15 seconds of a ride and how that changes things. One of the areas we really invested is in one of the features in the car itself, the in-vehicle screens. So we actually have a Waymo vehicle today here outside by the lobby, so if you want to go check it out. But one of the things we've done is invested a lot there because we know that one of the main surfaces that riders have with Waymo is going to be the car, that screen. And so we've spent a lot of time putting user research into it to think about what's the right level of information to provide to the rider so that they feel like they have a sense of what the car is thinking. And I think it's proven to be really effective. So I think those are the two levels, right? Like it has to be broad-based education, and then trying to get people within the first 15 seconds to realize that this is actually quite capable.
I think having taken a bunch of these rides, like being able to see the LiDAR on the screen and seeing how the car is seeing the environment, it gives you a lot of confidence. And I think it makes you feel much more at peace that like you understand what the car is going to do before it does it. And then let's go right up here in front.
So, Dyson, the premise is that the real problem is not so much your car, but all the other cars. And there needs to be some kind of industry standard so that the other guys are predictable. Are you working with all the other people to have, everybody can have their own technology, but a standard set of rules for road behavior?
So I might think about that from two perspectives. One is, yes, you're right that one of the challenges is the predictability of the other road actors, right? And that's one of the bigger challenges. But I would say that one of the keys for us is that we believe we need to build the technology such that it can deal with the current real-life realities of the roads today, right? That even if we work with other self-driving vendors, right? The reality is it's going to take time for all this technology to roll out. So our focus is around how are pedestrians, cyclists, other drivers, how do those act, right? On the second side is, yeah, I do think there's opportunity for collaboration across the industry, like that we have shared goals in terms of bringing safety to the roads. I think right now, most of that collaboration is in the context of education, right? So for instance, there is an industry collaboration around the Partners for Automated Vehicle Education that is a bunch of companies across the space, and we can work together on that. But I think first and foremost, we can't depend on either a standard of behavior or necessarily kind of current road users adhering to anything. And so for us to get that technology out sooner rather than later, we're going to have to deal with those challenges.